Wallace, and with the grain elevator. Peter is starting the recording for us, and I hope that is okay with everybody, that this is recorded, and that will help us to pull the notes together afterwards. So Joe Banner, it is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Jim. I'm sorry, I'm on my iPad and I've never used it before in a Zoom call, so I don't know where my camera is at. So apologies for the weird angle. Yeah, but we thank you for the opportunity to be with all of you all, and I've admired the work so much and your support for the Descendants Project in my community from when we first started really advocating for our community's health. Joy and I, my twin sister Joy, we started the Descendants Project really as a way to incorporate more of the history of our enslaved ancestors into the tourism industry. So with that being said, we started, Joy and I have a 20 plus year experience in tourism. And we've been in that economy and seeing how much economy was produced by that, but also noticing that our ancestors, our enslaved ancestors, because we descend from all of them, but the enslaved ancestors' history was not really being told the way that we thought was humane and was right for our for their lineage and for their line. So we really wanted to infuse more of our stories into tourism, and we pushed back. We started to see connection between us advocating for our rights, our history being told, and how the government did not want us. I work for the Tourist Commission, which is a political subdivision, and it's a very powerful political subdivision. And having that job really showed me how all of these different threads of politics were actually in tourism. I also saw how heavy industry was really embedded in tourism too. Part of the hotel motel occupancy taxes that go to pay and fund the Tourist Commission that I work for come from the heavy industry of petrochemical plants, as they were renting hotels to expand their plants or for plant turnovers. So it was like a snake kind of eating its own tail type situation. And I realized that really tourism was not the biggest advocate for what Joy and I were planning. So we wanted to really separate ourselves from that type of industry, lean more into tourism, but we understood that if the tourism would not be described in a way or presented in a way that was uplifting to Black residents, that's not an industry that they would not want to be involved with. So just by us, we wanted to really define what it meant to be a descendant and get more and more people to actually understand what that meant and to have pride in that title, therefore expand it into the tourism economy and get those same community members who are being harmed by petrochemical and other heavy industries into something that was safer and more dignified. So that was the initial plan for the Descendants Project. Very early on into our inception, however, we found out that our community was the proposed location for a grain terminal from Greenfield, Louisiana. And very quickly, although environmental justice had always been one of our mission, obviously, to get those people away, our community members, from the unhealthy jobs of petrochemical or grain or aluminum. It had environmental justice, but not to this degree. And we didn't expect that we'd have to kind of drop everything in order to save our community. And really, I think sometimes I'm labeled as an activist, or we're labeled as advocates, or we're saying that it's environmental justice. At the heart of the matter, like with Daniel's piece saw, we're just a community trying to save our community members who are communities. And that's something that I always, a message I always want people first, is that at the end of the day, it's our home and we want to protect it. And when someone is there's that saying, when you have barbarians at the gate, although I don't know if I should use it, in our backyard. And so we just really had to thing in order to get there. We started off activating the community, having community meetings, coming up with just a very basic stop the Wallace grain elevator. type signage that we still, those obnoxious yellow and black signs that we have around our yard. So we started with that and just did all that we could to get our community engaged and understand, right? Really, it wasn't necessarily for us to tell them if they should want this or not. Greenfield, Louisiana. And let me just step back a little bit, because I wanted to Greenfield based company. Mr. Christopher James, who touts himself as a green investor. He was able to get, through his company Engine Number One, 3 people on the Exxon board. And that was the thing about Exxon, make it a more justice-oriented organization, if you can believe that. So while he is getting, more and more press, good press about being this green activist, at the same time, he's in our community bringing something as pollutant causing as a grain export terminal, grain elevator. Oh, am I breaking up?
Yes, it looks like for a few people. So when you were talking about what Greenfield, Louisiana was, you broke up pretty badly then. I see some nodding, so I think it's not just me. Okay. And it looks like Joe is frozen. Oh, okay. Joe, you're back now, but you were frozen right then. And we also, at the beginning of you describing what Greenfield, Louisiana was, we kind of missed that whole little section just at the beginning. Oh no.
Hi, is that better? Let me move. I'm gonna move a little bit.
So you might take off your video. Yeah, that might help.
Yeah.
The audio too. Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes, we'll see.
So, yeah, so just Greenfield, Louisiana is actually a Denver-based company. Their main investor is Christopher James, who touts himself as this impact investor and this green investor. Through his company, Engine Number One, they were able to actually get 3 board members replaced. And supposedly the new board members would make Exxon a way more climate justice organization. So that really didn't amount to anything, but the whole point is that he got a lot of attention for being green activist at the same time, or investor, I should say, at the same time he is proposing a grain terminal for our community. So he's trying to take Wallace out, grain export facilities. This one would produce about 87 tons of particulate matter a year. In addition to that, it was in our backyards. The zoning of the land is also in question. The land that they want to use was zoned for most of plastics in the 90s and illegally zoned. So even despite our protest against that, and also alerting the parish that the distance requirements around the heavy industry zoning, even if it was accepted, was being violated, they pushed forward. And we let Christopher James know, and his company, to no actual results with him. Till this day, he never has sat down with the community. Not that it would make a difference, but at least it'd be a good old college try. So yeah, we've just been fighting back however we can against him, and it's really scary because he is, this is a billionaire. This is a man who, this project is $660 million. And, that's a $45 million purchase of land. So we just felt very lost from the beginning, but we knew we had our voice and we were just going to push back as much as we can. What helped us though, really, was having that tourism background, being really engaged with our history and knowing that there are also other areas of protection that we could use, going back or utilizing historic preservation. Evergreen Plantation and Whitney Plantation are 2 neighboring plantation homes to our property, actually on a border of where the Greenfield property would be at. And from those are 2 plantations that we descend from. One of those plantations, Evergreen, is a National Historic Landmark. That's very important because it has federal protection around this ground. It comes with a lot more scrutiny for anybody who wants to bring projects. Whitney, in addition to that, is a National Historic Registered District. and it qualifies as a national historic landmark, although it doesn't have the designation, but just having the opportunity for it to qualify also gives it a certain, increases the scrutiny of any project that wants to come around it. So here you have us, descendants of the enslaved, in this really strange spot intersection of environmental justice and history, and utilizing and trying to use all of these different parts to stop the from Greenfield from building, and also when Formosa came or anybody else, because the real problem is not with the industry is a problem, right? But it's the door that's left open and keeps letting these people come in to the community and try to exploit that. We, like last week, we had a designation from the National Trust for Historic Preservation that is named the West Bank of St. John Parish in Wallace as on America's 11 most endangered historic places in the country. So that's a really big honor. And honor is the wrong word, I guess, but really it is an honor, because what it does is it brings a lot of attention to our fight. The National Trust is a nonprofit, but is an influential and a well-listened to organization with historic preservation. And they have a great seat at the table before the Army Corps of Engineers 106 process, which is what we're going through right now. And we're lucky to have them engaged. Just about the 106, any federal project or any project that requires federal funding or federal access needs to go through basically an analysis of how that project would impact their historical buildings, sites, areas in that area. So that was through the 106 process. What that did was it allowed us as community members who were left out of the negotiating and left out of the talks. It gave us a very prominent seat at the table as Greenfield is applying for that permit from the Army Corps of Engineers, which is the most important permit that you need to get. And now, because we have all of these, we have us descendants there and our descendant community of Wallace, and also the National Trust of Historic Preservation's attorney is there with us, the Advisory Council of Historic Preservation, which is the highest preservation office that we have in the country. It really only kind of communicates between the president and Congress. So we have them there who wrote at those 106 meetings, advocating for us, or advocating or making sure that the descendant community is listened to. So in addition to protecting plantation homes, they are also looking at the descendants of the enslaved as also they need to be protected through everything, understanding the vulnerability and the compromising position that we have been put in because of slavery, because of these historic sites. So that's how I'm most proud, I think, of our work is that we are now we have that presence that has been denied for a lot of us for a very long time, especially working in tourism, where I always felt we were just put on the back burner as part of that history. So that really is validating for us to now have some of these really powerful agencies working with us. Our 106 process, we have a few indigenous tribes who are also on those phone calls. So we had an indigenous tribe from Oklahoma that's calling in, and they even requested their own 106 meeting because they are their own government. So not only do we get our community engaged, but to see the indigenous community come and really want to be a part in honoring and understanding, not say understanding, but just being there and understanding the solidarity of us trying to protect our ancestors. So I know that was a lot, and I will pause if there are any questions or anything that
Does anyone have a question? I guess my first question would be, and I see Ann's hand and Peter's up. So my question would be, how does the ancestral burial grounds figure into the fight that you have had, and the response of the company to your suggesting there may be burial grounds there?
I'm sorry, I think I'm breaking up, but I think you were asking about the ancestral burial grounds. Yes, so I'm sorry, I did not mention, didn't bring that up before, but the grain terminal where it would be located is the former home, I guess, former home of 3 different plantations. Wherever there was a plantation, which is essentially all of the River Road, there are burial grounds, at least one burial ground for the enslaved. And even more than enslaved, also many other people who were on the plantations who maybe didn't have an opportunity, didn't get a chance to be buried in the cemetery, but for sure we know the enslaved will be buried there because they did not have the choice to go into the church cemeteries, many of them. So where were you going to put your dead and your loved ones? Those are because cemeteries have a protection in Louisiana, and many other states have some cemetery protection. Louisiana has some of the strongest. Not to say that it's the strongest it could be and should be, but it's strong enough to where it does give us an opportunity to fight legally and protect and advocate for the burial grounds. So that's one of the issues that we brought up about the digging, about violating these grounds, and the 106. That's very important to know that the burial grounds are there and locating them and disturbing them. So it's been very, very important for our mission and what we're fighting for. Also, it's just the fact that we as descendants should have the right to go in, to be able to see or experience a space where our ancestors were buried. They did not choose to be buried there. It'd be one thing if this was a choice, not that it make it better, but it's not like it's a church and there's a cemetery that they can go where you know and expect there's going to be peace and quiet. They picked places the best that they could to give them that salinity that they need for this. And now, because plantations they became plants, now we just want to build on top of them. So that's just not right in our eyes and many other people's eyes, that they still, like, even in their death, they can't be free. Still in their death, they're still being harassed. And we are, like, we've just had enough of it. So we're fighting back as best as we could to stop that.
Thank you very much. Peter, your question next.
Yeah, Joe, is there any kind of archaeological survey underway to validate some of those grave sites? I was really struck by the one that's directly adjacent to the Greenfield property there. Is it possible that could be validated as a burial site through archaeology?
Yes, so we have Dr. Brian Gray at UNO who has studied, that's the Woodville Cemetery, and Dr. Jerry Mehta, who's actually here from Florida, who has a group of Evergreen Field School, who's done some research there. That is very much likely a burial ground, a cemetery that goes beyond 1913, which is what Greenfield wants to state. Not that 1913 doesn't make it extraordinarily historic, but we believe that boundaries extend beyond the tombstones that you see. And that's what most archaeologists would say. There's a reason why that community put that there. That street that we went down, Peter, if you recall, that is the quarter roads for the Millioret Plantation, which is right, which the home sits on Whitney's plantation ground. So you have the descendant community there, where the quarters would have been at. You have the plantation home, and then you have a burial site, a cemetery. So it's already still basically the way it was in the 1800s. And that's what we are doing to extend as much as we can that research beyond the tombstones. It's just like, it's hard. It's Louisiana's ground is hard because you don't, the GPR, the ground penetrating radar that can be used in other places, really can't be used in Louisiana due to the clay. The clay and the trees and the plants, but mostly because of the clay, which also makes our land very valuable because we have that clay and we have a lot of people trying to get to that clay. What we have been able to do is find anomalies through mapping. So by layering mapping, cartographic mapping, you can layer throughout the decades and see where cemeteries were marked on a map from like the 1800s. And then you can still see an anomaly, which could be trees, which could be bricks, could be different things. When you see these anomalies happening now, it points to either a burial ground, or it could be the foundation of a sugar mill. It could be the foundations of the slave cabins and homes. So that's like the closest that we have to identifying it. And we do have several anomalies on that Greenfield site.
Thank you. Anne.
Thank you.
I am very, very impressed with what you are able to accomplish and the momentum that you are building here in Louisiana, here in the Gulf South. I'm wondering how this might be supported and perhaps even duplicated on a larger scale nationwide, or bringing international attention to this. I know that you did go to Paris and some of the other, in Egypt, I believe, for bringing the message outward. Very excited that you are have gotten the site on the most endangered list. That makes huge difference. But can you give some ideas about how people from a distance might be able to support you and learn from you?
Thank you, Anne. It's a good question. One of the best ways that you can help right now is we have a petition that is going straight to the Army Corps, and I'll share the link, of Army Corps of Engineers telling them to deny Greenfield's permit. So we have that petition that I will share the link with. It's through Only One, and I ask you to please share it to as many people as possible and tell them to keep sharing it. The National Trust of Historic Preservation also has the same petition. It says the same thing, but it's a different petition. So we kind of did it. We had to do two separate just because the platform that we were using was separate from theirs, and they have like more legal things they have to jump through. So hoops they have to jump through. So that's why it's two, but please, they go to the same place. And we're very, it's a wonderful partnership with the National Trust of Historic Preservation. They're also a nonprofit too. So any support that you give them, that helps communities like us. What helps us too is a lot of times we are battling, I feel like we're in a fight to get funders to understand like petrochemical. Sometimes they're like, well, you all are not really fighting petrochemical, which we always fight petrochemical. We are triaging a grain terminal. But sometimes our funders can get so kind of like caught up, like, I got to make this fit. I got to see how we can connect this to petrochemical. So really just understanding how this history, how you're grasping it. So hopefully this conversation helps you to understand, like, it all comes back to fighting exploitation. It all is, it's exploitation through sugar, which was refining, from pet chem to grain. It's all exploitation of a community, which is ours and a lot of the communities in Cancer Alley. So that messaging of broadening it out a little bit, not so much about focusing on that one thing, but really kind of taking all of these things together, could really help with support. But voices and names, that means so much. Having just a simple petition signed and sharing it, it's the world to us.
Jonathan Leal, please. Thank you.
Yeah, Joe, thank you for this information. It's really extraordinarily useful and appreciated. My question, maybe not surprising because I am a lawyer. I'm curious about the status of your lawsuit against the parish for violation of the open meetings law, what the status of that is, and just sort of a reach maybe of a question, but is it Christopher James, the name of the investor who's behind this?
Yes.
He's based in San Francisco, and I know he's got this kind of semi-Teflon suit of environmental activism that he wears everywhere outside of Southern Louisiana. Is there a way either through, I don't know if his corporation is publicly held, I don't know if there's a way to get to people who fund him, basically to try to take his reputation, to to tarnish his reputation by disclosing to people who would not otherwise know about the grain elevator and would not otherwise know about the Descendants Project, to learn about what he's doing here and how awful he is.
Yeah, I'll start with your last question first. Finding the investors, really pressuring them. And honestly, we haven't done that as much because we've been just really working like so much on this part right now. Now that we have a little bit more, we've gotten to the step, right? We can kind of get back into focusing more on his investors. And like I think Chase Bank, for example, is one that it has the loan for the company. Also, the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, of course, represents us on some permitting, but also letting their board know that this person is what he's doing in Cancer Alley and how he is exploiting our area. Yeah, just really getting the word. We had a video that we aired in New York and San Francisco. We got about 100,000 views from that video. So we do have some movement. I think we can start to air those again. But like you're right, just focusing on those investors and letting people know. Well, let me just, for one example, Denver gave Greenfield basically a tax deal to have their headquarters in Denver. And I looked at the board for this group, this economic development group, and saw a lot of them look like very environmental minded opportunities within the people in that group. I know they have no idea what this grain elevator is. So reaching out to all of those members, I think would be good.
Thank you.
Yeah, just an update on our case. We had our hearing last week regarding the zoning. That's what we're still in St. John Parish. We're now waiting for the judge's decision. What was disappointing in that hearing was the attorney for the parish essentially sat down and said, our argument is the same as Greenfield because Greenfield intervened in the case. So it's sad when you're in St. John the Baptist Parish where St. John the Baptist fought corruption and costing his life. And to be in St. John and see the government essentially say, we're just going to let Greenfield, another company, come in and argue, so like it's right, it's all out in the open to show you how much our parish cooperates, colludes with organizations and companies like this.
Well,
Welcome to Louisiana.
yeah, exactly. Thank you very much, Joe, for this and for your presentation. I was at the event last Saturday, and we had Mark Morial there making a statement on behalf of the National Coalition for Historic Places, for Historic Preservation, National Council for Historic Preservation, and a number of other individuals who are involved in trying to save historic places from being overrun by development. And at the same time, I might add that I had this idea of having this session because there was also the word hit the street that in Ascension Parish, they thought there might also be burial grounds on the area where they were planning to put up the Air Products facility. At this time, I left Kaitlyn Joshua earlier this morning. She was filling in for her twin sister, the other activist twin sisters in Louisiana. And Angel Bradford was over at the Capitol as they were leading a reorganization of the Sierra Club, now taken over by Ben Jealous, who used to work with the NAACP, lead the NAACP. Some of us have lost some folks to unemployment recently as a result of the Sierra Club reorganization. I'm somewhat saddened for that, but I do not believe that Kaitlyn will be able to make it here with us today. So I would suggest that we take a few more minutes for a few more questions from Joe. And then I see Peter has a question up, and then we will close out this meeting in a little bit with a short look at the remaining legislative issues that we have here in Louisiana. So, Peter.
Yeah, two things, Reverend Jim. Number one, I would like to move that the REAP team ask GNOICC to sign on to both petitions and see if we have a consensus here to do that. And number two, I'd like to move the GNOICC challenge St. John the Baptist Parish to wake up and start making use of the considerable Inflation Reduction Act funds that they have to convert to a clean energy economy. So two motions.
Would you restate them, Peter? I think I would like to second them both.
Yeah, first of all, the GNOICC sign on to both the petitions that this banner is talking about. And secondly, the GNOICC addressed Right St. John the Baptist Parish excoriate's too strong a word, but challenge them to begin to find a way to use Inflation Reduction Act funds, which are immediately available to them, to convert their economic concept to a clean energy economy.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I will take one of those at a time. The first is and I will do that for a reason, because I have a question about the second one. The first one is to sign on to these petitions that are being offered. Is there any, is there a second to these two petitions from Joe?
From Peter, you mean?
From Peter?
I will second them for purposes of discussion.
Okay. This is moved and seconded. Any discussion on these two petitions? Peter, can you give the summary of the statements of what these two petitions are, please?
Yeah, the first is to the Army Corps of Engineers, asking them to deny the Greenfield permit.
Okay.
And the second is to Joe, was it the National Historic Trust? Did I get that right? Asking them to oppose the permit.
Yeah, so, well, the National Trust is already opposing the permit. They have a petition, so you just need to sign their petition, which on their site too. So it's two petitions from our organization. Yeah, I will include the other petition
Okay.
link.
Any comment on these two petitions? Dor.
I'm just in no way am I trying to shift the focus of this. I think, Joe, you've done an excellent job of saying this is a continuation of the exploitation that's been there for centuries. What I will offer is that there's a larger discussion right now, particularly in geopolitical circles, about a growing famine around the world. And I suspect the grain that this terminal will ship is a significant part of that. You've got a drought in Europe and you've got a drought in China right now that's reducing their food supply. What happens when the world runs short of food? I mean, up till now, we've had a system that basically covered that, but it looks like Egypt's going to be the short person in the global scheme. And I'm just offering that up to say, where is this grain headed? And is it really part of this geopolitical thing?
So the bulk of this grain is headed to China as feedstock. So that, and it's not that it's basically just like exporting the grain. There are 4 other grain elevators, terminals in St. Charles Parish back to back to back. There is more than enough capacity to move the grain. The problem is that money is already spoken for. This is an opportunity for someone else to get their hands in the grain. So there's also an abandoned grain terminal elevator that's maybe 10 miles from me, just sitting there, nothing. If that would be an opportunity, not that I wish to put that, but the infrastructure is already there. So rather than coming to our community, which does not have the proper zoning, which is way too close to residents, and just being an EJ community at that, there are better places for them to have that capacity. So, I mean, maybe there are other places in the country where you would have the distance you needed to not have the grain there or have all of this pollution happen to us. Those are the considerations. But I think that's, good question. I'm happy you posed that, because that's what makes this argument so much harder when you hear about grain and you're thinking of something like bread and these very, that's food is, you need that. It's so important. But the way that it's being produced and the ways that it's being produced is just indicative of like the overconsumption that we have a lot about, and the over processing too that we have. But even with that, that's an argument for a different day. There are definitely other grain elevators and grain terminals all throughout Louisiana, especially within Cancer Alley. I know there's 3 in St. Charles alone and a few others across the region.
Thank you for that. I could have spoken to that one as well, having once been in the grain industry and selling grain elevator equipment. But plenty of capacity, I would say, very present in this area already at this time. Jonathan, I believe I have you next for next question.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. And I think what Tor is raising is a question that Tor, you and I have exchanged thoughts about this in other contexts as well. In the context of carbon capture and carbon sequestration, carbon capture and storage, and the damage done to the Gulf Coast of Louisiana from the Inflation Reduction Act's demand that lease sales go forward in the Gulf for additional oil and gas sales, where we need to produce energy for critical places in the world, and it has a collateral consequence on the Gulf Coast South. This is another to me, this is another example of a critically, let's give the grain that is being produced or whose commerce is being facilitated by the Greenfield elevator the benefit of the doubt, and say this is critically important for world hunger in certain places. We're faced again with the same issue of what trade-off do we accept for the creation of this when it has a potentially devastating impact on local communities that is irreparable. And when it is facilitated through corrupt local practices and violations of basic accountability and representation. What we're facing is, this is an example of ends being used to justify corrupt means. And this is a discussion which I think we ought to be having, frankly, but is not, unfortunately, not being had in any public sphere that I'm aware of, except perhaps in small groups like our own. There are some federal statutes that are supposed to require balancing of interests so that everything, good and bad, that is associated with a particular project that gets federal money is put on the table for everyone to comment on. That's not happening here either, as far as I'm aware. Certainly not in the context of the Army Corps permit. Certainly not in the context of the National Trust's involvement. And what I personally come down to is the imperative to protect the integrity of local communities. We must find ways, if this grain is critically important for world hunger, to build a terminal, if that's necessary, in a location where it will not destroy history and culture and the integrity of an existing community, or else I can not only not support it, I must oppose it, regardless of that ultimate consequence. And that's just a personal choice I end up having to make for myself.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thank you very much. Robert,
Yes, thank you.
we are 5 after, by the way, Robert.
I'll keep it
already.
very short. Respecting the integrity of local communities is not something that Louisiana has done. It is not part of the blood that flows in the Louisiana government. We do need grain elevators. We do need energy, but this has to be distributed. When I look at the maps, there is nothing off the coast of Florida, and yet all of the offshore oil rigs are off the coast of Louisiana. So if nothing else, I think we need to raise voices about distributing the responsibility and the needs. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. And Geraldine.
The only comment I wanted to add was that in St. John the Baptist Parish, Cargill is the largest grain elevator, from what I understand, in the world. So it feeds the world, is one of the statements that has been made by it. So why we need another one, I don't understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Peter on these 2 petitions. Is there any other discussion as regard?
Jim, I would suggest that we request that send a request from this committee to Pastor Manning, recommending that he sign these petitions on behalf of GNOICC. That would be my suggestion for the protocol.
Is that an amendment? Offer that as an amendment?
If that's appropriate, I'd be happy to offer it as an amendment. Yes.
It has to be, and I second it. Both of them.
Okay. Any discussion on the amendment? See no discussion on the amendment. Would it be okay with everybody here to either raise their hand and say yes, or answer yes in the chat? Or no, if you would prefer to say no to this request? Or abstain? We have many yeses. Is there a no amongst the group? Okay. Claire, do you have a comment?
Oh, no.
There's just a hand up? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Scratching
All
my
right.
head.
Yep.
Chin.
Okay. And Peter's second motion was regards, I believe you said St. John the Baptist. I believe, though, that Joe is in St. James Parish. Am I correct, Joe?
No,
No, St. John.
You are in St. John Baptist. Okay. Okay.
Jim, that we're over time, and that may be too big of issue to take up.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I think that's probably
But it is just bizarre that these parishes aren't jumping on the opportunity to start to create a clean energy economy.
right.
There's endless land there for, for community solar, all sorts of applications, manufacturing that is not dirty, it's just tragic that these parishes, including New Orleans, and I'd like us to support, we can talk about this. I sent you all the FNO proposal that we sign on in asking the city to reveal what their plans are to convert to a clean energy economy.
Yeah.
And I'd like to propose that we do that also, but why St.
Okay.
John's and the others aren't jumping in and starting to make use of the opportunity that's before them is just beyond me.
Thank you.
Ignorance, Peter, ignorance.
Thank you very much. Honora, I believe that you are in Ascension Parish, or very near it.
Yes,
Do you
I'm
have
in
do you have
Ascension.
anything that you can share about the Air Products site with regarding
Yeah,
burial
I don't
grounds?
really, I don't really know anything about that in particular, but that is interesting to hear. This was the first I had heard of that. I've been more focused on the pipeline and where they're going to actually inject in Lake Maurepas and the impacts of that. But definitely the air liquid whole industrial complex, along with all the others that are in Ascension Parish, is problematic to me. Unfortunately, our leadership does not agree. They look at this like most of the other parish leaders as this is investment in the community and jobs in the community, even though they give them all the tax breaks. And they could look at this as being clean, even if it's not.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
on that fight too.
Yeah, I know. I've seen you there in the past, and I just realized that you were also in that area, and I wanted to double check if there was anything that you could share about that as well. So thank you very much for that. Tor, you have a final question, and if anybody wants to propose any legislation that they wish to bring up, we're bemoaning one loss, I think, already with regards to the Lake Maurepas. But Tor, let's go for you, and then Jonathan, and then we'll
Yeah.
probably close now.
Just real quick, there's a third conversation that I'm very involved with, which is the risk of much rapid sea level rise. And so I just want to say you've got all three of these. I love the idea of community solar, but you got to watch out for how fast the sea levels are going to rise, because that's going to cause an outflow of people from New Orleans. I just think it's healthy to have all three of these stories discussed, because you have a perfect goal to fight the exploitation. It just sounds like they want to think this right in the middle of a vulnerable community like they have in the past. But it's, you get to distinguish. We're not against shipping of grain. It's just, why are you going to put it in a sensitive place? That makes no sense. And at the same right, you got a cognitive plan to say, if the sea level rises, this is how we're going to handle it in a way that doesn't tear apart your community, and it's not every person for themselves.
Yeah, thank you for that. Jonathan.
Thank you, Jim. It just occurred to me, thinking back on Peter's original motion that we're now forwarding to Pastor Manning for his signature on the petition, with respect to St. John the Baptist Parish and trying to instruct them about or inform them about what kinds of federal funds are available to them, that it might also be useful, and unfortunately I can't be part of this because I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, but for GNYCC, perhaps with Honora's help and others in the area, could try to get on an agenda for the parish council and present to the parish council a suggestion that they do this in a very detailed and informational way. Perhaps some groundwork beforehand to get folks who are supportive of this from within the parish to join that kind of an effort, so that it wouldn't be perceived as, I don't know if there's such a thing as big city elites in Louisiana as there is with coastal elites in the Midwest, but basically showing that this is an initiative that has not just support from coalitions based in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, but also from within the parish, to really lay it out for them about how they could do this. Just a thought.
Very good thought. I really appreciate that, particularly having just taken the second climate reality training, and some really powerful stuff, as well as some nice videos from Tor recently, is 77 in Baton Rouge, 87 in Seattle yesterday. Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I love the idea of presenting to the St. John Parish Council or any of the councils. But what I would think, I think one first step that should be done is communicating with the community first. Because oftentimes I think we need to get better understanding of what we want and don't want. And I know knowing our council and how they act, that they're already looking at how they can exploit that for green. The green terminal is a green industry, as they keep saying. So that's my only precaution, is that we need a little bit, I think, community engagement first to kind of get to what we can do, and then give them an idea, like, these are the projects that we want or would be good for us. I know that add more time, but I think because of our community and our council and the corruption there.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree.
Amen,
with
Joe.
that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. It's very important. Every step of the way to be in touch with local communities and not be a person who looks like me rolling in like I have some answers to share with people, or several of the others of us. Maybe Geraldine would make that presentation for us.
I think even getting the concerned citizens and to send this project and our communities together would be a good start, so we can outreach there.
Yeah.
And we can plan some in another meeting.
Yeah. Well,
No problem.
that had kind of been my hope with Earthworks, to be perhaps developing that, and perhaps it's already ongoing. There's many meetings that take place that I don't know about as they are going on. So is there anything, Jonathan, as far as legislation in Louisiana that you would like to bring up at this time?
Well, I'm, I guess humble is not really the appropriate word, but deeply, deeply disappointed, and although not surprised by the failures of the Lake Maurepas bill, the bills to stop carbon capture and storage under Lake Maurepas. I think it bodes extremely ill for the prospects of Robbie Carter's bill to rescind the authority of private entities to condemn property effectively for easements for carbon capture infrastructure. But as far as I know, that bill is still alive. And if I'm correct about that, then it certainly would not hurt, and maybe even ought to be done, that we make some effort to contact Carter's office and see if there's hope that we can maybe support him on that.
Okay. All right. I am going to suggest that it is 1:17, and really appreciate everyone's presence. The meeting again ran longer than anticipated, but I really appreciated Joe giving us a very nice summary of what has happened in their area. And it's quite, this is not yet fully determined, but at this time, they are delighted that there's no construction equipment on the site after having seen quite a bit before this time. So is there anyone who would like to close this meeting with a word of prayer or thanksgiving?